A good writer must also be a good reader. So, fellow writers, what are you reading these days, and what can you learn from it for your own writing to improve it and apply it to your own writing and all that stuff? It's the same with the Friday video for you. I'm going to answer that question for myself in just a second. Normally, I started off a number of videos with that question, and usually it's when I do a book review. And today I'm doing a book review, but not of a fiction book that I read, like literature to I guess gain insight from. This book I'm talking about today that I just finished reading is a nonfiction one. It's called Reading Like a Writer by Francine Prose, a guide for people who love books and for those who want to write them. So it's this is like a writing book, a commentary on writing basically, which I think is also important to read. I don't read like a ton of these. Maybe I should, but probably most writing teachers would just say read good books anyway, which I'm trying to do, which is also what she says. So let me tell you about this book and what I liked about it, and hopefully what might help you too. I actually read this for my work, which was cool because I work on a team of writers, and one of our speakers or someone who came to speak to our team for professional development or something had recommended this book, and they let us buy a copy and read it as a team on work time, which is pretty cool. And I think my work does things like that. It was helpful. It gave us some helpful insights. I will say this book is about writing fiction and reading fiction. So at work we do like business writing. I'm not yet, fingers crossed. I'm not yet working in a place where I do creative fiction for money. Um, so the kind of work the kind of writing I do for work is like business. It's like reports for a nonprofit and stuff like that. So each day we had to kind of ask the question, or each time my team talked about it, we had to ask the question. Okay, this is a different mode of writing than what we do, but can we still apply some things to it? But I think for those of us who enjoy creative writing on the side, like I do and many of you do, I think this would be a good resource. So Francine Prose, I hadn't heard of her before I read this book. But just reading the book and reading her stories about her life and kind of some of the things she talks about there. I mean, it's not mostly about her life, but naturally she includes some personal examples. She's a longtime creative writing professor, it sounds like, and she has written some novels too that are listed in the back of the book. So she knows what she's talking about at least as much as anybody else in the field, and she opened to the question of can writing be taught or can creative writing be taught? That's always kind of a the age old question of like talent versus teaching, like how much of it can actually be learned and how much of it is just innate. And she kind of expands the debate. I mean, throughout the book a little bit, and even talks about how like some of our writing workshops and creative writing classes tend to produce cookie cutter stories that are all almost that all follow a similar formula, and a lot of our great literature that we study in classrooms does not follow those things. So I'm going to spoil it for you. I mean, it's a nonfiction book, so it's not like it has spoilers. But she basically concludes, or she comes back to this many times, saying that there are no rules for writing, or maybe a better way to phrase it is you have to know the rules before you can break them, because we all have these rules we try to follow, like show or don't tell, like certain rules about dialogue, about just conventions we try to follow for when we write fiction, and those are not bad, and I try to follow those a lot myself, but then for each one, she can always find an example of someone in a published book, in I guess a classic book, or at least a well-known, well-read one, who didn't follow that and did something different, and it worked for them. So each time we talked about it as a team, we kind of concluded like, yeah, it's a little confusing, honestly, because she gives these rules, but then, or she talks about these rules, but then she shows someone who doesn't follow that. So really, the solution is what works, and what doesn't, which is I don't know, not super helpful if you're trying to read a book for tips or pointers. I know I'm a rules person and a very details person, so that can feel frustrating to me sometimes. But I think no, she gives some good examples that show. I mean, obviously you can't copy it like a I don't know. You wouldn't want to copy them in a cookie cutter, like just trying to make it work exactly like this one person's way, kind of way. But just to learn from them and be influenced and just learn some techniques from some of the greats. That's a good purpose of this book. So she goes through several different parts of writing, like just elements of fiction. Like, I mean, she talks of her her first few chapters are just the basic elements. She calls them the chapters are titled words, sentences, and paragraphs. Later, she goes into character and dialogue, and just and like narration and details and different styles of those elements and what different writers have done with them. And again, she takes out, she goes over the conventional rules that many of us have been taught in creative writing classes, and of course, as a creative writing professor, she knows all those. And here she basically says, these rules are more like guidelines, or these rules are great, but if if something else works for you, then do that instead. So I know for someone who's looking for hard and fast rules, it can be frustrating, but I think there's a number of tips to be gleaned, and a number of good examples to follow. Toward the end, she has a whole chapter on Chekhov, um, which I makes me feel like a bad English major because I've not read much Chekhov. I think I read The Cherry Orchard in college. Actually, a lot for my team of writers, a lot of these books that she refers to made us feel kind of like bad book people because I'm like, I haven't read most of these. I don't know. Some of them are more recent than classics of the last generation because um, in college they say in English major you don't read any living authors. I mean, that's not entirely true, but that's the joke. But she has this big bibliography at the end of like books to be read immediately, just her recommended reading list, and we were going through here, and I'm like, I have a master's degree in English, and I've read maybe a tenth of these, not many. So it helps you realize how kind of as a reader and as a writer, you still have room to grow. It's almost as if 7 years of college still can't introduce you to all the great literature that's out there. So anyway, yeah, she has lots of resources for getting started and good books to read. And if you see a passage that catches your eye and you're like, that's really interesting, how she talks about it or how that author did that, you can find the actual book and read it. She has a chapter toward the end about Chekhov, and again, I haven't read a lot of Chekhov, but just some of her descriptions made me interested to check out more. Maybe, no pun intended on Chekhov. Check out, but yeah, she she's kind of on this throughout the whole book, but for a Chekhov chapter, she talks specifically about like I told this rule to my creative writing class, we things like you can't have the POV character die as narrator, and then I read a Chekhov story where he did that and it worked. Or like you can't switch POVs a bunch of times within a short story, and then I read a Chekhov story where he did that and it worked. And she finds all these things where she's like Chekhov broke the rules, and yet he's one of the greats, and he's still, he's still made these stories work. So that was interesting to me, and just reading her description of some of his stories, some of his short stories, I was like, maybe I should read more Chekhov, in all my free time with my TBR pilots piling high. But yeah, I mean, just a recommendation like this makes me interested to read more. I mean, not, I'm sure I won't get to everything on her list, but it'll be something. So anyway, yeah, it's a good book. Again, if you're looking for hard and fast rules, this obviously won't help you. There are no rules, but it kind of it addresses both the reading and the writing side because, as I always say, a good writer must be a good reader. So she says, "What should you be reading as a writer?" And there's all kinds of stuff we couldn't read. I think some of the literary writer greats would frown upon some of the commercial fiction that we and I read. I mean, they probably haven't read as many Star Wars novels as I have and stuff like that. But 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 I was an English major in college. I'm still trying to read some classics, even though not as many as I did when I was in school. But there's some I didn't get to that I still want to read. And so she helps give you a list of what to read, where to look, and what kind of things you can learn from it. So anyway, Reading Like a Writer by Francine Prose. Good book, good resource for readers and writers. I'd recommend it. Check it out if you get a chance. Okay, and I hope something from it helps your writing. And I hope, um, even if you don't read the book, and there's one rule you can take away from even this short video, I'd say it's know the rules before you can break them, or just treat the rules as guidelines more than rules, and then we'll go from there. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend. Thanks for watching. Bye.